I'm Rich Lund, and a little bit over a month ago, I sent out an AMA request video. AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. I've tried to answer the overwhelming majority of questions that hit the deadline, so to get a lot more in and not have them hit the editing floor, some of these answers, they're going to be pretty quick. But in other cases, the question was a pretty intriguing one, and the answer's a bit longer. But hey, you went in with eyes open. You saw how long this video was, and you clicked on it. This video, this is for the hardcore enthusiast. You want the details. Here they come. But there were a lot of questions. I feel honored. Let's get into it. Melody Gaming 64 asked, why did you start raising monarchs? What got you into it? What was your inspiration? It all started summer 2011. On a dog walk, I happened to find a milkweed plant that had 2 monarch caterpillars upon it. They were around 3rd instar, but back then I didn't even know what an instar was, so I'm just guessing here. I did know back then that was milkweed. I did know these were monarch butterfly caterpillars. And I knew that people could raise them at home. But back then also, I was coaching Science Olympiad, and I knew that in 2013, entomology was cycling through our events. So I kind of wanted to start learning a bit more, get ready for it. Well, I reared and released those 2 successfully, and I was using the internet to kind of guide me along the way. But this was back in 2011. Internet was not really that fleshed out on how to do these things. There were sources, but I was kind of muddling through on my own. Around 2012, I think I reared about 6 using internet resources and more blurry videos. But it was also in 2012 that I stumbled upon the plight of the monarch butterfly. Got to find out what was actually going on with it. But it was kind of just towards the end of that summer. So the following year, summer of 2013, I really delved a lot more into it. What was happening with the monarch butterfly? What had happened to the population? What was going on with the loss of habitat and milkweed around the country, around North America? 2013 was really, for me, very much a learning year, finding out a lot about it. By the end of 2013, I realized that this was a problem that, number one, humans had caused. Second, this is a problem that we pretty much know the solution to: restore the habitat, plant milkweed. And third, this solution is a pretty inexpensive thing to do. We did this, we know how to fix it, and it's cheap to fix it. It just requires some work. I realized if we don't choose to do something about this, we would be losing the monarch population east of the Rockies for no other reason than apathy. Pretty heavy, I know. But I intended that year to do a Raising Monarchs video series and then a Planting Milkweed video series, which I ended up doing 2014 and then 2015. I was trying to get my Science Olympiad team psyched into this. By the time I had made the Raising Monarchs series, though, I was realizing, hey, maybe this wasn't just for Science Olympiad, other people might enjoy it too. And what I was really kind of trying to do with those videos, parts 1 through 5, the original ones, were make the videos that could have helped me back when I was trying to figure it out on my own. And I also did have a plan here. If I wanted the best bet at engaging my team, I needed to do so the way that I was engaged. You want to try to get somebody to plant some milkweed? That's kind of tough to do if that's the first rolling out statement you got. If I were just to come in first saying, hey, check out the plight of the monarchs and let's plant some milkweed, it wouldn't have been as engaging as it would be to first have the students enjoy the monarch, rear it, make a personal connection with the animal. Then they could connect that to their personal life experience when they realize, hey, if we want to help out this animal, milkweed's the way to go. People are a lot more invested in the idea of planting milkweed if they've made a personal connection with the monarchs first. That's been my strategy for Science Olympiad. It's been my strategy with these videos too. This is a great question. Thank you very much for asking it. Ashley asked, when on average do I first start finding monarchs during a season, and what's the latest that I've released an adult? Well, I'm in Michigan, so certainly latitude's important here, and I usually begin seeing them on average around mid-June. And there was a season where I was finding some eggs still in September and ended up having some releases in October. The latest release, I believe if not mistaken, was October 10th. But that really showed me too, for those caterpillars, when they were getting towards 4th and 5th instar, they needed plenty of milkweed, and it was getting harder and harder to find that milkweed. After that season, I kind of gave myself the personal cutoff of no longer taking in eggs after August has concluded. Mythic Gaming MK wanted to know, what should you do if you know that you have caterpillars that are infested or infected with flies or NPV? What should you do? Well, 2 different things, so kind of 2 different answers. If I know that it has NPV, I'm going to definitely isolate it from the rest and sanitize anything that it could have come into contact with. NPV can definitely be something that's communicable, transferable from caterpillar to caterpillar. And I'm going to hope for the best for the little guy, because once they have NPV, it's probably a goner. In the other case, if I know that a tachnid fly, I imagine that's the flies we're talking about, have infected the the caterpillar with the eggs, well, that's an actual injection that the fly does. So those eggs that are developing inside of the caterpillar, while that's, not cool for that guy, it's not something that can harm or be transferred over to other caterpillars. So I personally, though, I would still isolate because I've never had a tachnid fly experience, so I kind of want to see how that turns out. But there wouldn't be a need to isolate the tachnid fly caterpillar from the rest of a group. Artemis asks, essentially, since the big move, what are the largest challenges that I've found concerning the monarchs and ways that they are vulnerable? What's the new area offer compared to the previous one? Definitely there's much more of a concentration of the urban population of people, and that has then brought in a whole lot more of traffic to where more pests, more things that can affect the milkweed, more of the aphids are in higher density here. Even if the milkweed isn't in a high density, the pests of the milkweed are. And I already filmed an upcoming episode on urban eggs and leaves, kind of goes a lot more into detail as to how has this been different. So, cool question. There's an episode coming up that's going to answer it a lot more. From You Are What You Eat. Do the chemicals involved in mosquito spraying harm monarchs at all of their life stages, some of their life stages, any of them? Well, the major chemical in like mosquito repellent, DEET, and other insecticides, they're definitely made to kill insects. If ingested by a monarch caterpillar, it's probably a goner, and it wouldn't take too much to do it. Now, a chrysalis and the adult, they don't really have a way of, actually like ingesting in the DEET, and that's where it could cause major harm, but that certainly doesn't mean they're invincible to it either. So, like, a little bit of DEET that glanced over onto a chrysalis probably isn't going to kill it, but it doesn't mean you can just sit there and spray it with DEET and think, it's invincible. And the same thing with an adult monarch butterfly as well. From Paradot 180. What nectar-producing plants in your garden do the monarch butterflies prefer? Which ones do they love the most? In either yard, at either residence, the old one or the new one, it's been the purple coneflowers. They love them. Matt Kenny asks, who's smarter, Beavis or Butthead? In my opinion, as an educator who's well-versed in many episodes, I'm going to have to give this one to Butthead, but only slightly. He's just a little bit less likely to take risks compared to Beavis. Granted, often both of them are doing something pretty stupid, but plenty of episodes, Butthead has come up with an idea and he convinces or forces Beavis to test out the idea first. Beavis is usually pretty easily convinced, quite more of an impulsive character, I think. That Butthead is having Beavis test out these ideas does show some amount of knowledge of the future and the idea of consequences. And that's my take on it. Whaler Beach asks, is there any other way to protect our caterpillars from predators? Birds, wasps, lizards, other than having to cage them? Quick answer, no, not that I know of. Now, Whaler, I'm not saying that you're asking for this, but we breached the subject. People are often looking for a magic bullet for plenty of things. Is there some chemical that we can spray all over our milkweed that will definitely not harm the monarch butterflies, eggs, or caterpillars, but will take care of any of the other nasties that might be on the milkweed plants, would deter any of the predators away from them, something that we could just spray on and leave, walk away, and not have to worry about it? I'm sorry, but to my knowledge, no such chemical exists. No amount of coffee grounds sprinkled somewhere, no high-pitched frequency sound is going to solve these problems and work wonders. Hey, I did just put out a video that showed some cinnamon around your milkweed plant can deter some ants that can then help reduce the number of aphids. But, that's the best as it gets. The solution to these issues, the thing that solves them, truly are barriers between the predators and the monarchs that you're trying to protect. Sheila Bowen asks, when does egg laying begin for first generation, and when do eggs start to become laid for second generation monarch butterflies? Well, to really get into the idea of the generations and how migration is associated with that, it's a little bit more complex than some of the general rules that we've learned about. An episode that was made that really fleshes out those ideas and helps get into the complexity of it is Which Generation Migrates? Please check that one out if you haven't, Sheila. Thank you for your question. It's answered in there. From Chris Pearson. Hey, Chris. Good to see you. Would I recommend using similar methods of rearing the monarchs for rearing other caterpillars of other species? Well, over the years, I applied nearly the same methods for rearing some eastern black swallowtail caterpillars that I found once, and also for some tussock moth eggs that I had found on milkweed. But in both cases, modifications had to exist. The eastern black swallowtail caterpillars, for example, they like to make their chrysalis not from a ceiling, but something a little bit less horizontal. And the tussock moths, well, because they're moths, they don't form a chrysalis, but instead they had to make a cocoon out of external materials. For that, I gave them some scraps of shredded paper. And touching on that invasive species part of the question, I would agree. Avoid invasive species whenever and wherever possible. We don't need more of them. Next up, Kit Libby. Wow, you have an awesome story. Rearing monarchs since the age of 9 and using that to help inspire you to write a college application essay. I'm honored, I'm floored. That's an awesome story. Okay, the question. What do I think about the milkweed population compared to a decade ago? Has the increase in conservation efforts made a difference? And are we on the right track to long-term stability? In my opinion, have we made a difference? Well, with the conservation efforts of planting milkweed, I know that there's more milkweed out there than if we hadn't spent the last 10 years planting what milkweed we did. Yes, more milkweed has made a difference. When I find an egg on a milkweed sprout that I know is going to be mowed down, or on a lone plant at a gas station parking lot where that one plant is not going to be enough to feed any one monarch, let alone the 3 eggs I've found on it, when I take in those eggs and I get to see them as adults fly off, I know I've made a difference for those individuals. By planting milkweed, we know that we're doing something to help out the monarch butterfly. We're increasing its chances. We are making a difference. How much of a difference? That could be debatable, but we are making one. Are we on track for long-term stability? And that might be really another way of asking the question, are we making enough of a difference? In both cases, I would say the answer is not yet. The population did experience a large drop, and we are at the lowest starting numbers that we've seen in 10 years. But the population did survive. I don't claim to know how much lower, but I do know that the population would be lower if it hadn't been for the milkweed that the last decade we've been planting. It's worth celebrating that, however unknown amount, we were involved with helping the monarch butterfly get over this most recent hurdle, and that we still have a population to talk about. I count that as a win. From here, though, it involves in the next 10 years the relative highs and lows of the population either plateauing, leveling out, which we kind of really don't hope to see at these low of numbers. After all, if the population was just at this level, well, the next extreme weather event could be enough to take them out. Or the relative highs and lows could be increasing over the next 10 years. That's what we hope to see. That would indicate that we're on our way to finding some long-term stability. Or, let's be honest, in the next 10 years, it could decrease further, and it doesn't have that much more room to decrease. What we dread, that this could be all over, that could happen too. But that's not my prediction, especially if we continue to put in the efforts of restoring habitat. We can solve this problem. Thoroughly awesome questions, Kit Libby. Thank you much. Next up, Joe Shanahan's got a great question here. Sparks a pretty interesting topic of discussion. Has there been any progress in developing a cure for OE parasites? Quick answer? No. And I'm saying that with a smile on my face. It's not really a goal. OE parasites have been with the monarch butterfly and the queen butterfly for millions and millions of years. We are not looking to try to eradicate it. Testing for OE is something optional. It's something that maybe you should do if you're rearing around 20 monarchs or more. Definitely if you're at 50 or more, it's something you probably should be doing. And the goal of testing for OE is to just make sure we don't have a large breakout of a OE. The goal is we don't want to be putting out into the environment more OE than is naturally already in our environment. But if I had an outbreak of, let's say, 10 monarchs in a row that had OE, well, that would indicate to me I had some OE parasites that infested my conditions. So again, the goal isn't to actually wipe out or cause an extinction of the OE parasite. It's just to make sure that we aren't having a large amount of OE, more than our environment normally would have, released out into there. Thank you for asking that question. It's a great topic to be able to talk a little bit more about. Senior Sea Dog asks essentially, are male monarch butterflies able to reproduce with more than one female? Are they able to be capable of multiple fertilizations? Well, my first response to this is that if anyone is considering the breeding of monarch butterflies, that they take a look at the episode, The Breeding Question, first. This, for responsibility's sake, I implore you. When it comes to the breeding of monarchs, as I state in that 2019 episode, I'm officially neutral on the subject. But to clarify, really, breeding of monarch butterflies, that's something more for the scientists to be doing, where professional standards of sanitation are ensured and health of the monarchs. I can't really think, jogging my head, of too many situations where there's a responsible reason why a hobbyist would need to be breeding monarch butterflies. I mean, there's a few, like maybe there's an educator who really has some lesson plans for the fall start of the school year, and they've had a low year and they've got a boy and a girl and they need a classroom supply of eggs ready for the fall. There are those kinds of situations. But again, I don't see too many where, oh yeah, that makes sense, would really turn up in a hobbyist's life. but I do see many unethical reasons why people might want to start breeding monarch butterflies. And usually, money's involved. And in the 5 years since that 2019 video, I'm seeing a lot more of that happening. Now, Sea-Dog, I don't know if you're looking for all that in the answer. I don't think that you were asking it, but it breached the subject. It's a good thing to talk about. Thank you for asking it. Let's assume the question just being for curiosity's sake. As far as I know it, every species of butterfly, every male for any species, monarch or otherwise, are capable of multiple fertilizations. Cool question. Thanks for breaching it and bringing up that subject. Mr. Bo Diggity asks a brilliant and touching and very insightful question, and kind of a difficult one for me to answer too. If you had to go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently? It's pretty difficult for me to answer these like time machine kind of questions where like if I went back and I changed some things, I'm the kind of guy that's thinking like, well, that's going to affect my current life, and who knows how that could really have a butterfly effect to it. Still, assuming no ill will happens to me in my timeline or anybody else's in this, I can certainly say that yes, hindsight is 20/20. Certainly, I could wish that I had known about OE or NPV earlier than I did. But I think we all could wish that. Back when I was finding out about these things, the internet didn't have a lot of information on it. And I, like many of you, I felt like a babe in the woods. I suppose I could always wish that I had known about some topics earlier, gotten some videos out sooner to just share it with you guys earlier. But I can also say that I know that every year I put out as many videos as I responsibly could with whatever was going on also in my life. Whether that be a year like 2018 where 17 videos came out, or a year like 2021 when I was moving and no videos on Monarchs came out. So in a way, I can kind of wish that some things had come out earlier, but I know that would have just taken time away from something else that needed my attention in my life. See how these questions are kind of tough for me to answer? But overall, I just don't really regret things too much in life in general. I recognize that, hey, if you make a mistake, promptly recognize it, admit it, learn from it. Then that mistake, that becomes really a valuable learning experience. I don't regret a lot of my mistakes or errors because I've learned from them. They're really valuable to me. I definitely wish I had said proboscis in part 5 instead of proboscis. That still sticks in my craw. Next up, user, I'm not going to pronounce that, but a valid, useful question. How would you help someone that is both proud to share their hobby, but is also clearly not taking care of frass and sanitation in their containers? Here are some strategies. First, I would recommend lead by example. Confrontation sucks for pretty much everybody involved. Don't get me wrong, sometimes in life confrontation is necessary, but perhaps not here. This would be, after all, someone we can assume they share a passion for the monarch butterfly, and they are somebody who is willing to also put in effort, put in action towards trying to help it. And I don't know if you've noticed around you, but that's still a pretty rare person to find. We likely have more in common with these people than any kind of differences that we've got. And it's always important to keep that in mind. So maybe try showing what you do and explain why you do it and what the benefits are. Show them why they should maybe want to do it too. Strategy number 2, throw me under the bus. Yes, I have made some of these videos with the knowledgeable intention that some people might need to put these videos into other people's hands as a way of kind of like breaching a subject without you having to be the one to breach the subject. Perhaps pertinent to the situation you're describing could be videos on sanitation, overcrowding. You might know what they could use most out of that repertoire, but I do recommend a slow exposure to that information, not being assaulted with tons of videos. Each one of those could take a little bit of time to mentally digest. Third strategy. In using the previous 2 strategies described, also for this third one, try to wait for the question to come up. Wait for them to get curious enough to ask you. Too much info given to us at once and we rob people of the chance to be curious. If instead we give the brain the chance to want to know these things, well, then they are very much more engaged. It's more meaningful, the things that they're learning at that time, and it's easier to learn it. They want to know because they want to know, not because they were told they were doing something wrong. So if you're showing them things about, sanitation or testing for OE parasites, give them that chance to ask, well, why is that important? Why do I want to do that? They're much more open to that knowledge and much more open to the suggestion of perhaps changing some of their style or some of their procedures. And then finally, strategy number 4, perhaps the most useful, but it depends upon the situation, point at the evidence. Not your opinion or your interpretation of the evidence, but just point at the evidence that can't really be debated or disputed. For example, and I don't know, have there been outbreaks? Have there been mass losses at times? Has there been NPV, Black Death, OE parasites in abundance? And if you can't find such evidence to point to, well, then I guess you have to ask the question to yourself, why was it that I felt that they were so clearly inadequate with their sanitation? And granted, it could be a case of there's obvious risk, just nothing bad has happened yet. That's a possibility too. But in such a case, I do think you're back to just using the first 3 strategies described. Awesome question to explore and discuss. Good luck if this is describing something you're about to try. All right, and the last one. Glenn Curtis asks, where do I see the population in the next 10 years? Better or worse? I do love the simplicity of this question and the options given. I see 10 years from now a population that is more known about and better understood, not less. I see a population we are more educated about in 10 years, not less. I see a population of butterflies that benefits from a human society that is more aware of their plight, not less. An insect population seen by more people as being something precious and worth preserving, not fewer. Who have come together and united to try to help it. That recognize that this is something that we can unite and all care about regardless of what differences we have in other avenues of life. That we recognize how much we have in common right here in wanting to preserve this animal. That we all share that desire to see this population climb and thrive. The numbers along the way, they're going to go up and down. More up than down, I hope. So I suppose my answer kind of seems only optimistic. But I can choose to be optimistic or pessimistic. Which choice is better for the monarch butterfly? But I do enjoy some cautious optimism. And I recognize that this 10-year vision that I have, well, I only get to see it come to fruition if we continue to roll up our sleeves and put in the work. Well, there we have it, the AMA results. And that was for you, viewer, the hardcore viewer that made it all the way through this. You wanted the details and you stayed till the end to get them. I want to thank you, this time not just for your interest in the monarch butterfly and conservation efforts towards it, but also for your interest being strong enough to listen to this guy prattle on about it. I'm Rich Lund. Thank you again for those who supplied the questions, and thanks again for checking this out. I hope your monarch season is going well, and I will see you further down the path.